We see another type of interaction, and this is parasitism. Parasitism is a kind of interaction which is seen among the organisms of a population. And in this interaction or interspecific interaction, the smaller or the microscopic species, the smaller species or the microscopic species, they actually feed or they derive their nutrition and take shelter in larger species. So we can define parasitism as a type of interspecific interaction in which one of the species, which is normally the smaller or the microscopic species, it thrives in larger species and it takes the nutrition and also the shelter in that large species. Now, the species which is actually uh, giving shelter and providing food is known as the host, whereas the one which is smaller and which is taking the shelter and deriving its nutrition from the host is known as the parasite. Now, in this type of interaction, the species which is out of the two species which are interacting, one of the species is harmed, whereas the other species get the benefit. And from here, we can make out the parasites are at the advantage side, whereas the host suffers the damage because it is not getting any benefit from the parasite. Parasite uh, are also the host specific. The parasites can be seen as host specific. That means specific type of parasite are adapted to thrive within that particular host. They have evolved various mechanisms, and we can rather say that they have co-evolved, and various kinds of adaptations are seen in the case of parasite. Few important ones are the loss of they have lost they over a period of time they have lost the sensory organs which are not important, so loss of unnecessary sense organs. Also, since they derive their nutrition directly from the host, there is no requirement of the digestive system. So, there is normally no digestive system present within the parasite as they obtain the nutrition directly from the host. Also, they show high reproductive capacity. So, the parasites multiply very fast within the host, and as a result the number increases rapidly. Now, another major adaptations which are seen in the parasite is the development of adhesive organs or any a structure which can provide an attachment or hook. They can easily hook to the parasite, so development of adhesive organs like the suckers, the hooks, which are found in various kinds of parasites. So, these are various adaptations which are seen in the parasites. Now, these adaptations have actually helped the parasite to thrive for a long period within the host. And it is therefore said that if the host develops certain mechanism to fight against the survival of the parasite in in response will also develop a mechanism so as to continue to sustain within that host. That is what we mean by co-evolving. Now there are example of the parasites which may have a complex life cycle. When we say life cycle, the parasite may be requiring sometime the host intermediate host to complete its life cycle. So we say there may be certain vectors which may be required, and vectors are those animals or organisms which transmit the parasite from an infected person to a healthy person. There can be many vectors, many type of vectors, and for example, the female Anopheles mosquito is the vector for the malarial parasite, that is Plasmodium vivax. And Tissy fly is the vector for sleeping sickness, that is Trypanosoma. Then the rabies virus is carried by the dog. So there are many examples, a dog and other animals. So there are many examples in which we see the parasites are transmitted from the from an infected person to the healthy person. So when we say vectors, they are infected persons, and these vectors play a major role over here, and they vectors help in transmitting the parasite to the healthy person. So vectors sometimes are important for the transmission of the parasitic forms. Coming to the life cycle of parasite, in broad we have seen various kinds of life cycle patterns of the parasites. Some of the parasites have complex life cycle. For example, the liver fluke. The liver fluke, which is a common parasite found in the vertebrates. It is a class, actually, it belongs to a class trematode of phylum Platyhelminthes, and it is actually they have complex life cycle, and they have two hosts. Normally the liver fluke will have two hosts. Now let us try and understand what is the life cycle pattern of this particular organism. It actually has two hosts, and one of the hosts may be the snail or the fish, and the second host is the man or any vertebrate. And the vertebrate is the primary host. It requires primary host for the reproduction. So primary host is the place where it reproduces. After reproduction, it releases the eggs and through the feces of these organisms. When the feces of these organisms reach the fresh water body, they are actually eggs, or the next level. It reaches in between. There are several stages, and it reaches to the snail or the fish, where the further development takes place, and later, the Cercaria, at the Cercaria stage, these are released by the snail or the fish, and these are then consumed by the vertebrates, that is the primary host, in the form of through the water, contaminated water, or maybe by food, like the food in the form of, it can be in the sheep, through the sheep, or it can be in the man, when the man or the human beings consume the fish directly. So these are, over here we find that liver fluke has a complex life cycle depending on the two hosts. The malarial parasite also has the vector, which is mosquito, and it also requires which passes on to the disease to other host. Now most of the parasites we have seen or we study, they are actually damaging the host. The parasites damage the host, and the damage can be the law or the effect of the parasite, how the parasites harmful effect of parasites. Wha- Because they are inside the body of the host, they may affect the host adversely. They may reduce the survival of the host. So the survival of the host is reduced. Survival capacity of the host is reduced. Also, the growth and the reproduction of the host is affected. So they affect the growth and reproduction of the host. The third important point is they reduce the population density of the host because they are affecting the reproduction capacity. So the reduce population density of host. Another important way in which they make the host vulnerable, because the host becomes physically weak. So they actually make the host vulnerable to predation. They are actually, because they affect the entire system of the host. Now when we talk of the parasites, the parasites can be divided into two categories depending upon whether they are whether they are thriving outside the host or whether they are thriving within the host. So when we see type of parasites, there are two types of parasites, that is ectoparasite and endoparasites. Ectoparasites are those parasites which depend on other living organism for food and shelter, and they live on the surface. For example, the ticks. So they are outside of the body, and the example is tick, or the lice, where they thrive on the host, but they do not enter inside the body of an organism. Whereas the endoparasite, they will obtain their food and they will take their shelter and are found inside the body of the host. Example is tapeworm, hookworm. There are many tapeworm, and there can be the liver fluke is an example, or we find the roundworm, the hookworm. All these are examples of the endoparasites. Now, another type of parasitism which is seen is the brood parasitism, and it is a clever parasitism. Brood parasitism is a phenomena in which a bird lays its egg in the nest of another bird and allows the other bird to incubate them. So, over there, the eggs of the parasite bird have actually evolved in such a way that it has a close resemblance to the eggs of the host, and as a result the host bird, it cannot distinguish the difference between its egg and the egg of the parasite, and as a result it will continue to incubate the eggs of the parasitic bird and allows it to develop over there. For example, the cuckoo lays its egg in the nest of the crows. And here, the crow will continue to incubate the eggs of cuckoo. So here we find that there is a definite, um, this is an example of the brood parasitism. And over here, parasitism has evolved, or it is very found in the organisms, in various organisms and population.